And it had really annoyed me because he had earlier refused to take the test because he could see no point in possessing the knowledge. However, in that period, those 6 years, I had already been subjected to all kinds of drugs and theories and experiments. And although I did have innumerable side effects, depending on what they were testing, they kept changing the rules. They kept changing the medications. They kept changing the combinations. They kept changing the various therapies. And so I would develop new side effects. I would report them. I would get answers back about this is very common, and so on and so forth. But I was here. I was alive. I was thriving. I was extremely good in my job. I was very happy in my work environment. And I was very happy in my home environment as well. But I was very sad about losing all those people. Some of my absolute closest friends, most of my absolute closest friends. I still have 3 left from that time. And then I added more since, of course. But imagine saying that out the innumerable friends that we all have. I mean, we don't think about how many friends. Well, perhaps some people do, but I've always been a very outgoing and very sociable person, and so I have gathered a lot of friends, and they were disappearing from me. Even some of my absolute closest friends were gone, with the exception of 1, 2, 3. And they're still with us today, thank God. And none of them are ill or HIV positive, but they could just as well have been. It really didn't matter. And then I went through a period in that time of terrible discrimination because of my HIV status, which I did not keep secret. I didn't announce it to the world. I didn't stand on a stoop and say, I'm HIV positive. Do you love me? But my closest friends all knew. And 1 or 2 of them, in moments of indiscretion, told other people that I didn't particularly know or feel close to, and so on and so forth. But I was a subject of gossip, and it was spreading around. And I found that, well, ironically, none of my straight friends knew about my HIV status, but suddenly all my gay friends did. And that's where I really experienced the horrible discrimination that occurred within the LGBT community in the early stages of HIV. And perhaps further on, I don't know exactly. I just know what I experienced. At any rate, my friend got very sick, and I had already decided at that point that I was going to do absolutely everything that I could for other people in the same position who perhaps weren't as lucky as me. So we joined a group here in Copenhagen called the Positive Group, and I became a board member there, and a cook. I cooked some meals, lunches. We served lunch every day, and we took turns making lunch and dinner and so on and so forth. I don't know, did I ever make a dinner? I don't know. At any rate, the group is still carrying on to this day. I'm still a member, but I'm a passive member. I stopped going in 1996 because I spent 3 years, the last 3 years from 93 to 96, nursing Fleming at home with his degenerating disease. It got worse and worse on, well, basically every day. And I remember when he first told me this, he had decided that he was going to die. He just said, okay, I have full-blown AIDS. There's no cure, nothing. I think I'll just lie down and die. And at that point, in 91, we had been together for 11 years at that point. And I said to him, well, hang on a second. I've been HIV positive. We were calling it HIV by then. I've been HIV positive since 1985, or perhaps beyond, and perhaps so have you. Because I don't know where we got it from, or where I got it from, or where you got it from, but I'm assuming we gave it to one another. I'm making that assumption. It's perhaps not fair, but we might as well take that into account. You gave it to me, I gave it to you. Who cares? Here we are now. I'm doing absolutely everything I can to stay alive. And it's not only for me, but it's for all those that come after. Because whatever they test me on, whatever they experiment on me, if it turns out to be valid and helpful, then other people will be helped by it. If I die, I die. I'm going to die anyway. I'm not going to worry about it. On the day that I die, I'll think about that stuff. But now, I'm alive. If you just intend to lie down and die, you can do it on your own. If you want to fight to survive, I'll stay with you to the bitter end, whether it's yours or mine. And he didn't take me seriously. So we did have a short separation. But the truth of the matter is that as he got sicker, yes, I'm smoking a cigarette. Sue me. I've earned it. Since he was accepting no therapy or medication or drugs or anything, he did develop a lot of the conditions that we know a reduced immune system defense can lead to. He had absolutely everything. All the fungus problems, spots, ordinary spots. I'm not talking about Carpus sarcoma, but horrible acne suddenly just appeared. He had also pneumonia several times. He lost weight very, very drastically. He lost his appetite. He had terrible vomiting spells, and it was quite horrible, really. Well, I couldn't leave him alone with that. So ironically, when we first moved apart, we moved apart for a very short time, less than a year, really. But we each had an apartment at completely opposite ends of town. He ran to my place, I ran to his place. Anyway, I digress. The purpose of this video really is to tell people that illness isn't the end, it's journey. And if you insist on using it as an anchor, then it'll drag you down. But you can live every day just the same, and you can achieve great things if you remember what it is you've survived. Now, since that time, or during that time even, because in 1995 I had a heart attack, my first. Well, I thought it was my first. I was actually sitting with Fleming, and it was very, very early in the morning. I think it was about 6 o'clock, and I had this terrible pain in my wrist, so I didn't want to wake Fleming up. Not that that was necessarily possible at that point. He was pretty gone. And I went to the hospital. It turned out it was a heart attack. Acute myocardial infarct, probably the most common of all heart attacks. I don't know that for sure. I just assume that's correct because I think I heard that somewhere. At any rate, they kept me in hospital for a while, which was really horrible because Fleming was lying in bed at home, and I was really, really worried about who was going to feed him, who was going to make his meals, and who was going to wash him, who was going to take care of him. And lo and behold, as I'm lying there under some narcotic fog that I'm sure, I don't know where it came from, but I'm assuming it was administered, he showed up. He was standing there, and he was sweating, and he looked horrible. And he said, "Why are you here? What's going on? They won't tell me anything." And that really ticked me off. Because he had, from the day that I moved here, been my only next of kin on any official papers. Because he was the only person I knew in the country when I first came here. But they wouldn't tell him. So, of course, I had to tell him. The doctor was standing beside me, and I said to the doctor, "Please explain to him." I had no energy to explain it. She explained it to him, and he was very upset, and he was worried and everything else. But it was a minor heart attack. But it turned out it wasn't my first. It was my second. I do not remember experiencing my first. I probably thought I was having indigestion, but they can measure this in the enzymes of your blood, and they can read that. And at that point, I'd already had 2. Since then, I've had 3 others, more serious, and I've had 2 angioplasties. And that's the limit. Although, I want to say straight away that my heart is fine today. But unfortunately, I lost Fleming in 1996. And we had, at that point, been together for 16 years. So, it caused a dramatic shift in my life. First of all, after nursing him for 3 years, the last 3 years of his life, it had become routine. Although I knew he would die, I still had this idea in the back of my mind that maybe I'd go first and I wouldn't have to experience that loss. But I didn't, and I did. The year that he died, I was in a fog for a long, long time. Sort of first in denial. I just thought it would go on forever. We had developed this routine. It never occurred to me it would stop. I mean, I knew rationally that it would. I had just fallen into a pattern, just like getting up every morning and going to work every day and so on. But I did lose him. And ironically, I had started a new job just 3 months before he died. And I threw myself into my work, really just to occupy myself with something. And at the time I was an airline accountant. Not really exciting work. And it occurred to me that this isn't what I should be doing. I should be doing something more useful. So I started to get involved in, shall we call it, extracurricular activities, doing things for different organizations and getting involved in the short time that I had free at the time, because I was working really long hours. I was working 10, 12-hour days, and I would go home and just pass out. And I was also learning to live alone at that point, after 16 years. And in fact, our 16-year relationship came straight after a 7-year relationship that I'd had already. So at that point, 23 years I had not lived alone. And I had to learn to do that all over again. And it was very difficult. And at the same time, very, not to sound cynical, but it was very liberating in a way, because I had to now think in completely different terms about how I should live my life. And you can't go from having this connection, this very deep and loving connection with another person for that many years, to just suddenly being alone on your own, shut off from the world. I had friends. I still have friends. I still have those friends that I had at that time. But it's difficult. It's a different relationship, as we all know. We have best friends, and then we have really good friends. Your best friend should be, and most often is, the person that you're sharing your life with. At least it was for me. So it was a difficult time. I worked really, really, really hard. I changed jobs shortly after that. And about 1 year in to my new job, I was having some problems that I thought were hemorrhoids. And I went in to get them checked, and they decided, yes, they were hemorrhoids and I should be operated for this. But as the surgeon was going, and at that point they had given me a spinal shot, so I could feel nothing. I couldn't feel my body, and I remember having my legs up in the stirrups like this, like a woman that was about to give birth, and the doctor is standing there between my legs. I can see his face, but I can see nothing else because there's a sheet over here. But I can just see his face, and he's going, you know, you can imagine, he's going like this. And suddenly he goes, and I thought, ooh, what does that mean? And suddenly he says, you know, I'm not going to take that. This is not a hemorrhoid. We have to have an oncologist for this. So suddenly I'm being wrapped up and shipped out of the operating room without being operated on, but still completely, you know, without feeling in the bottom half of my body. And the following day, I mean, no wait list here. The following day I go back into surgery, and this time I'm not awake. And they complete the surgery and a biopsy, and they confirm that it was cancer, colon cancer, that had attacked so much of the muscle that it all had to be carved away. So before I knew it, I went in there whole, and I came out without a hole because they had sewed it up. They had to take away all the muscle tissue around the anus, and as such, it would no longer be useful, in addition to a great chunk of the large intestine at the end. But I would no longer be able to you know, use that end for any functional purpose. And I had a colostomy. Suddenly, I had an asshole on my stomach. They had confirmed that it was a tumor, it was cancerous, and they had to take it out. And they had no choice but to take it out. And they did. I wasn't complaining about that, but I did sort of think, you know, how am I going to fart? I was 50 years old. 50. One of the side effects, or one of the results of that surgery, was that, first of all, the good news was that the tumor came back benign. They had taken it out, sacrificed my bumhole, but it was fine, it was gone. I needn't worry about it again. However, there was one other thing that happened. Whatever it is they hit, at that point, my sex life was over. Because in addition to the tissue they removed, they also removed the ability to feel anything here. And I've been suffering from that in varying degrees ever since. I need a cane to walk because I have no feeling in the bottom part of my body, and other than cramps. You get cramps, really bad cramps. I have no history of cramps prior to that, but since then it has been increasing from year to year, to the point where you can stab me in the leg, I won't feel that, but I'll have a cramp that will, in the bottom part of my leg or in my foot, that will literally catapult me out of my bed in the middle of the night while I'm asleep. So it's not fun, and it's not funny. But the worst part about it is that I wouldn't say my sexuality is gone, but my ability to do anything about it certainly has. And I knew that already in 2001, so that's a long time ago. But they said the cancer was gone. Well, all right, so, you know, that's just the way it is. You know, I'm going to have to learn to live with that as well, and I did. Or I thought I was. But 10 months later, the cancer surfaced again in my lymph nodes. It was the same cancer that they told me that I was cured of, but now it was a lymph node cancer. Again with surgery, but this time aggressive chemotherapy was required. And I also have to say at the time that I was very, very involved in spirituality. Not that that was anything new to me, but certainly on this level, suddenly I was alone. I had time to think and study and read. And I was studying Reiki at the time, which is a spiritual healing system. And I wasn't doing it to necessarily share it with anyone. It was completely egotistical and self-involved. I was really thinking of developing a self-healing system. Well, at that time, I was also, as a result of my study in Reiki, I fell into Buddhist studies, not for the first time, but for the first time in many, many years. And I began to take it seriously because of the meditation practices involved. And I started reading different books and getting a little more involved in what was going on locally in the Buddhist tradition. But when the cancer came back in the fall of 2001, they decided that this aggressive form of chemotherapy was what I needed. The problem was that because of my HIV status at the time, or not because of my status, but because of the diminished ability for my immune system to react to these poisons that constituted the chemotherapy, that there was a great possibility I wouldn't do very well, and that's exactly what happened. I had been scheduled for 8 different rounds of chemotherapy. I was being hospitalized the whole time because that's how drastic they were, in addition to which they didn't know how my body was going to react. But after each chemo, after the first chemo, I needed several liters of fresh blood to kickstart my own red blood cells. After the second time, the same process was repeated, but I became weaker and less responsive, basically not in the room. When they were talking to me, I remember nothing after the second between the second and the third chemo, I remember very little. So after the third chemo and 11 blood transfusions to kickstart my red blood cells, they said stop. And they said, we can't risk continuing the chemo because it may very well kill you. And I said, well, all right, okay, that's the way it is, fine. Having said that, I am not altogether sure I was with it. As it says, I remember the discussion, but I only remember it in sort of like slideshow type pictures in my memory. At any rate, they came back to me some days later, I don't know, 4 days later, 5 days later, after I had recovered to the extent that I was rational and I was sentient. At any rate, I could certainly understand what they were saying. And they said, look, we have a problem. Your cancer is not cured and will not likely be cured by only these 3 chemos that you have been subjected to. And really, this kind of cancer, we don't really have an answer for. And we have nothing to offer you except perhaps radiation therapy, which is not known to be effective with this cancer. But it's all we've got. And I said, well, it's all you've got. It's all I've got. If it's all you've got, it's all I've got. Let's go for it. So, after a short break, only a few weeks, I was subjected to a series of radiation, rather harsh radiation treatments, 38 to be exact, 38 days in a row of very, very directed radiation therapy. I didn't mind them at the time. They didn't hurt. I felt nothing. I did not have any kind of immediate effect or immediate suffering directly from the treatments. And they were, of course, all in the lower half of my body, although a wide area at first, and then it sort of shrunk down to a more localized area. But on the whole, it was basically everything from my waist to my thighs, or a little bit higher, from my belly button to my thighs, more or less. So I thought after the 38, and I was still, ironically, I was suffering from the side effects of the chemotherapy. I'd lost all my hair. Some of it never came back. But I lost all the hair on my body. I didn't have to shave for ages and ages and ages. That was wonderful, I can tell you. I mean, the only thing I hate more than not shaving, or than shaving, is allowing hair to grow on my face. Now, I do have this, but we won't get into that. That's just, decor. At any rate, I did go back to work. And I stayed at work until it turned out that about half a year, 8 months later, none of my ordinary bodily functions were functioning. I had horrible, horrible pains. I kept saying in my stomach, but they went all the way to my back and my sides and up and down, and just really horrible pain. And at that point, it had occurred to me, as I was reporting back to the oncologist that I had actually not had a bowel movement in recent memory. So of course they send me for a scan, and it turns out that the radiation damage to my upper intestine, the upper part of my large intestine, the lower part of my small intestine, had been melted together and had formed a kind of a sponge, and nothing was passing through. It was a miracle I was alive. I hadn't died of some other related infection, because it could have exploded, but it didn't. However, I was sent in for surgery straight away, and they removed a whole bunch of other bits and bobs from my gut, and I think a meter of the small intestine and another 55 centimeters from the top of the large intestine, which changes things considerably in terms of your ability to process food and the nutrients in food. So now I've had HIV, 5 heart attacks, and 2 cancers. I survived. I lived on. I'd lost my partner of 16 years. I was getting on with life. But at that point, I was still so ill that I couldn't really work. And at the time, I had probably the best employer in Europe. And they sent my papers off to the insurance company saying that I was, well, in fact, at that point, the municipality also considered me invalid, too ill to work on a full-time basis, or on, for that matter, on a part-time basis. I was no longer required to work. And because of that, the company sent the papers in to our pension fund, which was also our sick insurance fund, and they began to pay me a disability salary based on the contributions that had been made on my behalf by the company. This was very lucky for me, because the day after this was approved, which was the 31st of December, and so I became invalid and on the insurance payroll from the 1st of January, and the 31st of December at midnight, the company went bankrupt. How ironic is that? So no longer did the company I was working for exist, but the insurance company that represented them still did, and still does. Well, that felt wrong somehow to me. Yes, I couldn't get up at a certain time and be 8 hours in an or 7.5 hours in an office situation because it was just too difficult. I was still learning to cope with all of this and the consequences of the various surgeries and chemo and radiation treatments that I'd had, and nothing was working like I remembered it. Here I am, I'm 51 years old at that point. Or no, I'm still 50 years old at that point. And I have no idea how I'm going to manage this bizarre thing called a colostomy and a completely unreliable body. So for a long time, I just concentrated on recovering. And when I say a long time, I mean don't know how long did it take me to get off my ass. At some point, within a year, I think, I had to start looking for... I had been so active all of my life, never without a job, except to go back to school, which I did in 95. I took a master's degree in 95 while I was taking care of my partner because it was easier to manage. I could skip classes. I didn't have to get docked for pay for that. And the company that I had been working for had closed their offices. So, I mean, everything worked out very intelligently from my point of view. And other than that, I'd never been unemployed. But having said that, I was never inactive. I was always up to something. So now I was starting to feel a little bit stir crazy, and I started to spend a little bit more time in the Buddhist temples that I'm still associated with. And at one point, one of the side organizations, one of them was a home hospice service, which I volunteered. Well, I took the course, which was over a 3-month period. There was a course on how to deal with dying people, which ironically I already knew because after Fleming died, I went through a similar process, although much more brief, with my own mother, because she really was dying at some point, and she was in hospital, and she kept slipping into these minor comas and so on and so forth. So I was there when she died as well. But I started getting involved in helping people, just talking to them really, who had rejected institutionalized death, such as in the palliative hospital department, or for that matter in a hospice. They wanted to be in their own homes, which I understood because my partner had done exactly the same thing. He had rejected hospice. He had rejected palliative care. He wanted to die at home, which is what he did. So I got very close to these people, and I did this for 10 years without a break. Actually, at one point I was visiting 3 people simultaneously. But mostly, you try to limit your involvement to just one patient because it's a lot to process. But I was very interested in this. I was very interested in having people believe that the life that they're living was still worth living, in spite of the fact that they were in the process of dying. Because after all, we're all in the process of dying. Just some of us are doing it quicker than others. And yet, you can't really know who's doing it quicker than others. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and that would be the end of me. So somebody that's suffering from a long-term disease might outlive me. Probably will. So my principle had always been to live today to the utmost. And there's no point in thinking negative thoughts because these make you unhappy. They increase your suffering. And they increase the suffering of the people around you. Because people don't like to watch other people die or suffer. And they absolutely don't like to watch other people die. Families become very uncomfortable with the whole situation. And yet, it's something we all have to go through. So a lot of my purpose was to just in addition to visiting these people who were dying, I also engaged the families to just accept what was going on as part of life. Because death is one of those things no one can avoid, so it can only be considered another chapter of life. What happens beyond that, I can't say. I have my ideas, of course, but I'm not going to tell them that. Whatever their faith or their belief might be, or their spirituality might be, it's for them to decide. But, having said that, we have now, and this is what we have control over, or rather, it's the only place where we can decide how we feel right now. I can't decide how I'm going to feel in an hour, and whatever I felt an hour ago, I can't do anything about that either. It's done. And this one I can't guess. This one, it's mine. So, let's work on that one. Having said that, I gradually got involved in more and more organizations. The more I felt the positive energy. In the interim, I'm practicing. I've become a Reiki master in the interim, and I'm practicing self-healing on a daily basis. In addition to which, through my Buddhism, I'm now included the medicine Buddha practice as part of my daily practice routine. And I'm teaching it to others. And I've started a group of cancer and heart patients to teach them healing meditation that they can do themselves, non-sectarian, that they can do themselves at home. However, they did like to meet up once a month, or however often it was in the end. I can't even remember anymore. It's a while since I've been doing it. And I devoted one day a week to the SOS Children's Village, the local department here. It's all administrative and, office work, something I'm not bad at. And, oh gosh, what else? Oh, well, anyway, I was doing a lot of things and supporting a lot of causes, and I started to blog a bit. I'm not very good at this whole computer thing, but I do know how to convey a message, I think, I hope. But for the last year, a year ago, they found some tumors, we'll call them polyps, on my bladder. And they had to go in and remove them. It was followed by a single chemotherapy, which was not intravenously applied, but injected directly into my bladder, which was another story altogether. It didn't have the same side effects as intravenous chemotherapy. It had its own complete set of monstrous side effects. However, my problem is that I've been sitting here for a year, virtually a prisoner in this apartment, because in addition to the problems that I already had, they have now created a new problem connected to bladder functions. So I'm sitting here and I'm feeling useless, really. I'm not feeling sorry for myself because I figure it must be karmically deserved. I'm here and I'm surviving it. And ironically, I don't feel very bad. I just can't take 10 steps outside without something unfortunate happening. So I'm still going to the clinics. I'm going to more clinics than you can shake a stick at on a regular basis. I have to go to the HIV clinic. I have to go to the heart clinic. I have to go to the cancer clinic. And I have to go to the, urologist. Let's not forget the urologist. What am I forgetting? I'm forgetting something. But anyway, point is, I need to learn the computer a bit more because I'm really dependent on it now. And I've been blogging, or rather I've been posting on other people's blogs. I do have a blog of my own. It's called The Gay Buddhist, by the way. So if you're looking for it, you might be able to. I don't know if you can find it, but it's called The Gay Buddhist. At any rate, this has been the hardest year. And it's been the hardest year because I'm still trying to work out my purpose, my function. I'm a bit at a loss because I still have an energy and a caring for people and a love for people. And it just feels like it just sorry. I can't see my contribution anymore. I'm having trouble identifying my usefulness to the world, really. And I'm not feeling very satisfied because I think I should be doing something more. I don't know how I can contribute more. It just feels like I'm not doing the right thing anymore. But as long as there's life, there's light. And as long as there's light, at some point in our lives, it will illuminate our purpose, our happiness. And this is what we need to know. Regardless of the pain and sorrow that and I still have chronic pain. I suffer from chronic, I have pain every day in all the bits of my body. But it hasn't taken over my spirit. I have learned to deal with it in a passive way. And in fact, had I not said that just now, I would have not been aware of my chronic pain. But because I mention it, suddenly everything lights up. So our spirituality, our mind, our attitude, our outlook on life, our desire to do good, our desire to feel well, our desire to think positive thoughts, our desire to love is what keeps us alive. And it keeps me smiling. Even though I'm not particularly happy with my present situation, because I know unless I, fall down, drop dead within the next little mile, I will find a purpose. I will find something to make myself useful. And when we do that, what else could we ask for? So bless you all. Think positive thoughts. And remember, you're only here for a short while. So make it a good while.